When you think about those huge construction jobs, a new railway, massive building, big infrastructure, it's easy to just picture the sheer scale of it all.
The complexity, the effort.
Exactly. And you focus on just getting it built. But really, the mark of success isn't just building something, is it? It's building it right.
Absolutely. Because if it doesn't work properly or it starts failing early, well, that's not just a failed project. It's wasted money, maybe even dangerous. A recipe for disputes. Quality is just fundamental.
And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're looking at a really common set of contracts, the NEC4 family, and specifically how they build quality right into the core.
We're zoning in on Core Clause 4, aren't we? Quality management in the engineering and construction contract.
Yep. The mission today is to sort of unpack that clause. What does quality mean here? Who does what? And how does the contract actually, help make sure the end result is what was agreed? This isn't just dry contract stuff. It's about how projects actually get delivered well.
And the NEC is known for trying to stimulate good management, good collaboration. Putting quality right in a core clause like this shows how vital it is.
It's not an add-on.
No, definitely not. It's baked in from the start. Sets the tone, quality matters, and it needs managing.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning, the planning. How does the contract make sure quality is even thought about before people start, pouring concrete? Clause 40.
Clause 40, that's the foundation. It makes it clear quality isn't just wishful thinking. It needs deliberate steps. First off, if the scope, that's the key document saying what to build, says the contractor needs a specific quality management system, well, they have to use one.
Right, but lots of contractors probably have those anyway for ISO standards and things.
Exactly. Many established ones do, for their own reasons. But here's the key NEC bit. Even if the scope doesn't demand a specific system, Clause 40 says the contractor must give the project manager two things: a quality policy statement and a quality plan.
And the project manager would just receive them?
No, they have to accept them. Particularly the quality plan. This isn't a tick box exercise.
Okay, so what's the difference? Policy versus plan.
The policy is the high-level commitment, we are committed to quality. The plan is the how. How, specifically on this project, will the contractor meet the quality requirements laid out in the scope? What processes, what checks? It's the project-specific roadmap for quality.
And the project manager needs to agree to that roadmap before things get going properly.
That's the idea. It forces that upfront thinking and agreement on the quality approach.
And what if the contractor then, doesn't follow their own plan? Is there any comeback?
Yes, that's the crucial next step in Clause 40. If the contractor isn't complying with their accepted quality plan, the project manager has the right to instruct them to correct that failure.
Ah, so there are teeth.
There are. It's a direct contractual instruction. It's about making sure that agreed process for quality is actually happening on the ground. If the plan said you'd do step C and you're skipping it, the PM can say, hold on, you need to follow the plan we agreed.
Right. It reinforces the plan's importance. Okay, so you've got an accepted plan. How do you check the work during construction actually meets the standard? That must be Clause 41, tests and inspections.
Spot on. Clause 41 sets up the procedures for checking the work as it progresses. It involves the contractor doing their checks and, importantly, the supervisor.
They work for the client. Right. Focused on quality.
Yes, their specific role is around inspection and testing for the client. And Clause 41 requires both the contractor and the supervisor to tell each other about tests and inspections they're planning.
So no surprises.
No surprises. And they also have to share the results. Plus, the supervisor has a specific right to actually watch the contractor carrying out their tests.
So they can see for themselves, like if the contractor's testing concrete samples.
Exactly. The supervisor can be there, observe the process, ensure it's done correctly according to the specification. It adds that layer of independent verification.
Now, there was something interesting in Clause 41 about delays, wasn't there? If the supervisor is slow with their tests.
Yes, this is a really key part of the NEC philosophy.
Yeah.
If the supervisor needs to do a test or inspection and they don't do it promptly, and that failure actually causes unnecessary delay to the contractor's work,
Then what?
then that delay can be a compensation event.
Wow, okay. So the client's team can actually cost the project time and money if they hold things up on the quality checking side.
Precisely. It puts the onus on everyone to be efficient. The supervisor can't just sit on test results or delay inspections indefinitely if it's holding up progress. It encourages timely action from the client side, too, which is crucial for collaboration and keeping things moving.
That's a really neat mechanism. It balances the responsibility. Okay, but even with plans and checks, sometimes things just aren't right. The work doesn't meet the standard.
Right.
How does NEC handle that? We're talking defects now.
We are. Clauses 43 and 44 deal with defects, but first you need the definition, which is back in clause 11.2. And it's really important to understand defect has a very specific meaning in NEC.
It's not just anything you don't like.
No, it's defined very clearly. A defect is a part of the works that is not in accordance with the scope. Or, if the contractor was responsible for the design of that part, it's not in accordance with the contractor's accepted design.
So it has to fail against a specific requirement written down somewhere, either in the client's scope or the contractor's agreed design.
Exactly that. You have to point to the requirement it doesn't meet. It avoids arguments about subjective quality.
Okay, so who actually finds and flags these defects?
That's primarily the supervisor's job under Clause 43. They have the power to instruct the contractor to search for a suspected defect, but they have to give reasons.
They can't just go on a fishing expedition.
No, they need a basis. Like, we're seeing damp patches here, investigate the waterproofing. If they find something that is a defect according to that definition, the supervisor then notifies the contractor formally.
And that notification triggers what?
It triggers the contractor's obligation to correct the notified defect. That's a core requirement.
Right. Now, the million-dollar question, or maybe the multi-million-dollar question on big projects, does the contractor get paid extra time or money for fixing these defects? Is it a compensation event?
And this is one of the most critical points about risk in NEC4. The general rule, the default position, is no. Correcting a notified defect is not a compensation event.
So the cost and time to fix work that wasn't right the first time, that sits with the contractor.
Usually, yes. It aligns with their basic obligation to build what's in the scope. However, there are very important specific exceptions. These are outlined in Clause 60.1, subsection 1.
Okay, exceptions. What are they? When might fixing a defect become a compensation event?
It can happen if a change to the scope is needed to correct the defect, and that change was provided by the contractor for their design at their own request, which is rare, or, and this is the more common scenario to watch for,
Yes.
if the change is needed in order to comply with other scope provided by the client.
Hang on, can you give an example of that? Complying with other client scope.
Sure. Let's say the client's scope documents are a bit contradictory. Maybe one drawing says a pipe must be 100 millimeter diameter, but another specification section says all pipes in that area must fit inside a 90 millimeter duct provided by the client. The contractor installs the 100 millimeter pipe as per the drawing.
Okay.
The supervisor then flags it as a defect because, well, it doesn't fit the 90 millimeter duct required by the other part of the client's scope. Now, to correct this, the scope effectively needs changing, maybe to specify a smaller pipe, if that change is made purely to resolve the conflict within the client's own documents.
Then fixing the defect caused by the client's conflicting information could be a compensation event.
It could well be, yes. Because the root cause wasn't the contractor failing to follow a clear instruction, but the client providing unclear or conflicting instructions in the scope. It's about fairly allocating the risk of errors or ambiguities in the scope itself.
That makes a lot of sense. So contractor fixes their own mistakes on their dime, generally. But if the mistake stems from an issue in the client's scope, it might be treated differently. That's a crucial detail.
It really is. It pushes the client to get their scope right, clear, and consistent.
What about finding defects later on? Say, part of the works is finished, handed over, the client is using it, like a road is open, and then a pothole appears that traces back to the original construction.
Clause 44 covers this. The contractor's obligation to correct notified defects continues even after takeover. If a defect is found in an area the client is now using, the project manager steps in to arrange the necessary access for the contractor to do the repair.
So the PM handles the logistics of getting the contractor back in.
Yes, and the contract clarifies that the defect correction period, the time the contractor has to fix it, only starts once that necessary access has been provided. It keeps things practical.
Okay, so supervisor notifies, contractor corrects, usually at own cost unless those exceptions apply. PM arranges access if needed. What's the final step? How does this defect period formally end?
That's the defect certificate. Also in Clause 44, it's issued by the supervisor.
And it signifies
Right.
what exactly?
It basically marks the end of the main defect correction process under the contract. It's issued either at the defects date, which is a date set in the contract data marking the end of the planned defect period, if there are no outstanding notified defects then.
Or if there are still defects being fixed.
Then it's issued later. It's issued at the earlier of two dates. either when the very last defect correction period finishes or the date when the supervisor confirms all notified defects have actually been corrected.
So it's the supervisor saying, okay, everything we found and told you about is now fixed, as far as we're concerned.
Essentially, yes. And it's a key milestone. Issuing the defect certificate often links to things like the final payment assessment and the cutoff point for notifying certain compensation events. It signals a move towards final closure. But,
There's always a but with contract.
well, a very important one here. Clause 44 is explicit. Issuing the defect certificate does not release the contractor from liability for defects which the supervisor had not found or notified.
Whoa. So latent defects, things hidden away that only appear years later. The contractor is still on the hook even after the certificate is issued.
Absolutely. The fundamental obligation is to provide the works in accordance with the scope. If something fails later because it fundamentally wasn't compliant, the defect certificate doesn't protect the contractor from that liability, provided it's within the relevant legal limitation periods, of course. It's a major protection for the client against hidden, undiscovered problems.
That really underscores the seriousness of getting it right the first time, not just fixing what gets spotted during the main period. Okay, throughout this, you've mentioned the supervisor and the project manager having distinct roles in quality. Can we just quickly recap who does what?
Definitely. The supervisor is the specialist inspector, you could say. Their job under Clause 4 is inspecting, testing, searching for defects, and notifying them. They're focused on the technical compliance of the physical works.
And the project manager.
The PM has the broader contract administration role. Regarding quality, they're the ones who accept the quality plan initially and instruct the contractor if they fail to follow that plan. They also handle the access arrangements for defect correction after takeover. Critically, NEC states they act independently in their defined roles.
One doesn't report to the other on these specific tasks. And what if the contractor disagrees with a quality-related decision? Say the PM won't accept the plan or the supervisor notifies a defect the contractor disputes.
The contract provides a clear route in the dispute resolution options, usually W1 or W2. If the contractor is unhappy with a decision or instruction from the PM or supervisor related to quality, their path is an endless argument on site. It's to refer the dispute to the adjudicator.
An independent third party.
Yes, appointed to make a fast, albeit potentially temporary decision to resolve the issue and keep the project moving. It avoids things grinding to a halt over quality disagreements.
Right, keeps the wheels turning. So we've walked through the quality planning, the checking, the fixing, the certification, the roles. Why does all this intricate detail in Core Clause 4 matter so much on a real-world project?
Well, it ties back to that core NEC aim. Stimulating good management, fostering better relationships. By having this clear, structured process for quality, what's expected, how it's checked, what happens when it's wrong, it cuts down massively on ambiguity.
Less room for arguments.
Exactly. Everyone knows where they stand, what their responsibilities are. It reduces uncertainty, which is a huge source of conflict in construction. It means quality isn't just a vague idea, it's measured against the scope, using agreed methods.
And it protects both sides, presumably.
Yes. The client gets assurance they're getting the quality specified. The contractor gets a clear process, knows what they have to do, and crucially, knows the specific situations where fixing something isn't automatically their cost, like those scope conflict examples. Understanding this stuff is just vital, practical knowledge for anyone working under NEC. It affects day-to-day operations, risk, cost, everything.
It really elevates quality from just, doing a good job to a properly managed contractual process.
It gives it the structure it needs, especially on complex projects.
So to wrap up, we've really dug into Core Clause 4 of the NEC4 ECC. We've seen how it sets up quality planning, handles testing and inspection, defines and manages defects, and uses the defect certificate while still holding the line on latent issues.
And understanding these mechanisms isn't just for contract lawyers. It's essential practical knowledge. It impacts how projects run, how costs are managed, and how well the parties actually work together. It makes quality a defined, manageable part of a contract.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you to ponder. Given that NEC4 provides this very clear, almost procedural framework in Clause 4 for managing quality and fixing things when they go wrong, does truly good management under this contract just mean following that process to the letter? Or does it also demand something more, a proactive, maybe more collaborative mindset from everyone involved, really focus on stopping defects from happening in the first place? Where does the process end and that proactive culture begin? Something to think about.